Hi everyone, Sean here from Lines and Wax, back at you with another video. Today I want to talk to you about Darkthrone from Newport, Norway. Yeah, now they're from Norway, obviously everybody knows who Darkthrone are. If you're into metal music, then you gotta know who Darkthrone are, right? I've just been listening to a lot of Darkthrone recently. I figured I'd finally go through the entire discography and fill the blanks where I haven't maybe visited one of their records for a long time. And I've ended up basically listening to the entire Darkthrone discography. So with the summer upon us and the blazing sun bearing down on the lovely British Isles, I have of course been inspired to listen to the coldest black metal, as you do, but I'm a strange person. So yeah, you know how this works. This is Darkthrone's albums ranked worst to best in one video, in one go. Stream of consciousness, just talking about it. Let's do it. Before we begin, I just want to quickly say, even though Darkthrone has, at the time of recording, 20 albums for me to go through, they will no doubt do more albums. This video will probably be put out of date and obsolete very quickly. But I don't think Darkthrone have ever done a bad album, ever. I've never ranked like a Darkthrone album lower than a 3 on Write Your Music, for example. So if you're looking for some spicy takes on some Darkthrone stuff, like the mid-career stuff or the punk stuff, you won't find it here. I like all Darkthrone stuff to some degree. There are albums that I enjoy far more than others. But you know, and we'll get into that now. But just off the record, I don't think they've done a bad album ever, including in last place at number 20, Goatlord. Yeah, people hate this fucking thing. Goatlord was one of the albums that Darkthrone did when they started running out of steam in the mid-90s. Things start slowing to a pace, and we got Goatlord in the same year as the other album, Total Death. But Goatlord, what Goatlord was, as I'm sure you're aware if you're a fan of Darkthrone in any capacity, is what Goatlord was the abandoned album, their abandoned second album. So Darkthrone used to be, before they did black metal, they did death metal, and they did one death metal album, and then they switched to the black metal style. Before they switched to the black metal style and started recording and releasing albums in that style, they had Goatlord pretty much fully demoed and ready for recording. It was their second album. Now this remained unreleased for a number of years, and when they finally released it in 1996, they added additional vocals over the top of it before releasing it. And this is where my problem lies, and this is why it's at number 20 right at the back. It's the vocals on this are dreadful, to be honest. They're all over the place. They're almost comedic. They don't really fit the music. And, people have been complaining about the vocals on this thing with good reason for a very long time. So, yeah, it's interesting for, fans of the band that want to hear all the guys' material. Of course, the fact that they released this forgotten second album from back in the day, brilliant, glad they did that. But then to re-record new vocals over the top of it, because originally it was just an instrumental, that was a bad idea. And I think the band have eventually come to realise this. You can now get the Goatlord original record. As of 2023, you can now get versions of Goatlord. I've seen it in record stores near me as well, and I've given it a listen, but I won't rank it here. You can now get Goatlord reissued without vocals on it, and it's much better to listen to. You finally appreciate what they were going for in the original demos without all those terrible vocals. So yeah, I mean, Goatlord, not really a canonical studio album, but anyway, it kind of is at the same time, so that's why it's here. So out of the canonical studio albums, then, my least favourite of the Darkthrone albums that are canonical studio records would be number 19, Circle of the Wagons. Now, Darkthrone, this came from 2010, so Darkthrone did this like punk thing, right? They in like 2005, 2006, they started doing like crust punk stuff in their black metal, and that mutated over the next 5 or 6 years into like crust punk mixed with heavy metal, and the black metal stuff was kind of pushed to the back. Obviously Darkthrone always has this underlying black metal sound, but on these records, crust punk and then heavy metal, as the records went on, kind of took over. Circle the Wagons then is probably the worst combination of both of those things for me. It's my least favourite album in the punk heavy metal style that Darkthrone did. None of the songs on this really, jump out at me. I like to call it the Darkthrone with Attitude era because they started going, yeah, fucking crust punk. But this doesn't really do anything for me. There's some interesting song titles. Like Eyes Burst at Dawn is an amazing song name, but like I don't like the songs on here. Graves of the 80s, Stylized Corpse, and I Am the Working Class are just not very good Darkthrone songs, to be honest with you. So this is why I don't hate this thing, but it's my least favourite Darkthrone album easily by a country mile, and that's why it's down here, right at the bottom. In 18th place is 1996's Total Death. And, again, this is not bad, it's just a bit bland. Darkthrone were definitely running out of steam at this point. They'd had, like, this intense run of classic records, and then a misstep, maybe, and then a total stumble, I guess, with Total Death. It's one of those middle period albums from Darkthrone that I have mostly historically overlooked. However, it's been a pretty silly thing to do because even though comparing to the classic stuff, it's not, up there with that, but it's still a fairly decent slab of black metal, especially in the style that Darkthrone did in the 90s. It's not too different from the early stuff, but it's not as raw and it's not as uncompromising. I think the major difference with Darkthrone's Total Death and why it just feels a bit off is that there are no songs written here by Fenriz, Darkthrone's drummer. He writes, I would say, probably most of the songs, and then the remaining Darkthrone member, Nocturnal Culto, writes the remainder of the songs. You can spend hours dissecting who wrote what song and who does them better, but, they both have their pros and cons, but personally, I prefer the Fenriz stuff, even though that's changed a bit recently, and we'll get to that in a bit. But on Total Death, nothing was written here by Fenriz. It was either written by Nocturnal Culto, or it was written by guest writers, like all other people from the black metal scene would come in and write songs on this thing. I don't have the exact list to hand right now, but like Ishan from Emperor wrote some of these songs. Fucking Satyr from Satyricon wrote some of these songs, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying these people can't write songs, but, it's just, I attribute, like, the long list of guest writers to have some sort of impact on Total Death's aesthetic and overall sound, and that's why I think it's probably one of my least favourite Darkthrone records. In at number 17, then, is The Underground Resistance. Now, this would be my least favourite punk or heavy metal era Darkthrone record if it wasn't for the last song, Leave No Cross Unturned. This 13-minute or nearly 14-minute absolute trip of a record is of a song rather than a record is the saving grace. Like, the rest of this material again isn't awful, but it's the weakest of the punk / heavy metal stuff that Darkthrone did. It's weaker than, Circle the Wagons, but like I said, Leave No Cross Unturned is so good that it pulls the album forward for me in a few more rungs up the ladder, as it were. When this first came out, I hated it because it had an MP3 rip of I had an MP3 rip of this thing, and the track list was backwards, and the opening moments of Leave No Cross Unturned had these like King Diamond kind of vocals rather, and I've grown to appreciate the this kind of vocal style with time. But when I was 10 years ago, I was just like, fuck this, I can't be arsed with this, and I've for that reason kind of, until recently, completely poo-pooed the Underground Resistance, and I don't listen to it ever, but in hindsight, this is quite hilarious, as Leave No Cross Unturned turns out is the best song on the entire thing and saves the entire album for me. Like I said, the arse end of this Darkthrone punk heavy metal era is not exactly dreadful, but it's not really my kind of metal, so this record, along with Circle the Wagons, is, as I say, the closest I come to really not enjoying Fenris and Nocturnal Culto and Total Death as well. But yeah, there we go. So in 16th place then, perhaps unsurprisingly, another record from this era, Fuck Off and Die, from 2007. Easily probably one of the better album titles, and, you know, another amazing album sleeve as well. It'll be thrown up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. It's fucking great. One of the best Darkthrone album covers. Amazing. But again, it doesn't really resonate with me. It's better than the ones that have passed, but I don't really have that many standout songs here. Like, I've really just harped on about Leave No Cross Unturned, but this thing flows really well. It's 40 minutes of solid, like, crusty punk and black metal mixed together. Like, there is a simple pleasure, I suppose, of Fuck Off and Die's analog warmth, you know? As with any Darkthrone record, it's a fucking riff machine, and it does marry black metal and crust punk in an interesting way, with a few heavy metal stylings, but not as much as it would come later in other records. So yeah, it's a mixed bag for me, and that's why it's in number 16 rather. In number 15th place, and this might be a controversial one for some of the more black metal loving fans of Darkthrone, and that's 2019's Old Star, back when the band were, you know, back to doing black metal again. And Old Star, it doesn't resonate with me, you know. It doesn't really grip me all that much. It is a subtle progression in their sound from when they stopped doing heavy metal and fucking, you know, punk kind of stuff. And with Arctic Thunder, which came before Old Star, they started doing like almost like a doomy thing. And, you know, on Old Star we get quite lengthy songs. There's only 6 songs on this album, and we go back to these longer songs and are, you know, it's almost morosely melodic in some ways, and the production is also noticeably cleaner, especially considering the production on most of the punk stuff that we just talked about. You know, Old Star is not, I feel like I'm saying this over and over again, it's not awful. It's actually a really good record. It's just, for what it is and how it changes up the Darkthrone sound and aesthetic back to something I would be more interested in, I don't like it as much as I thought I would like it, you know? So that's why it's in number 15 and not like number 5 or whatever. In the same era, 3 years earlier, we have Arctic Thunder from 2016, so that would be slightly better, and that was why I'm putting this in 14th place. Arctic Thunder, I think, just kind of beats out Old Star. It makes a, you know, slightly better, more coherent listen. I love the album cover as well. It's really like, it's like just a forest in the dark and a nice fire. Like, that's the perfect Darkthrone album cover if I've ever seen one. But yeah, I mean, this had Thunderleech on it, I think. And again, it's a good 40 minutes or so of just, you know, solid black metal. It's a return to form. You know, it was a return to form after all the punk and heavy metal stuff. They started doing black metal again, you know, mixed with a bit of doom, like I said, and it was amazing. You know, after the King Diamond worshipping stuff, like on the Underground Resistance, there is a welcome absence of ridiculous wailing on Arctic Thunder, and that alone for me launched this in the correct trajectory in my head, you know. And like I said, they kind of continued in this theme on Old Star, but I think Arctic Thunder was a bit better than Old Star, so it gets a slightly higher ranking in the discography ranking. Yeah, so in 13th place then, let's stop talking about all this new stuff. 13th would be Soulside Journey from 1991. So this is the album the guys did before they became a black metal band. It is completely, utterly, totally stylistically different from everything else they would ever touch. It has that like cold, ominous kind of almost technical kind of feel of like the more European, as ridiculous as that sounds, because obviously judging where the band are geographically, but they've got that like clean kind of death metal sound from Europe rather than the dirty, disgusting death metal sound from America. And considering that they would go on wallowing in like lo-fi filth for, you know, the majority of their career, this is incredibly clean and technical. You know, you get the odd echo or frostbitten riff that would define the sound going into the 90s. But Soulside Journey is, honestly, it's a clanking death metal beast, and it's an interesting beginning for one of the biggest names in black metal rather than death metal. And this album has its, it has its detractors and it has its fans. It has a lot of fans, I think, but for me, it's not why I come to Darkthrone. So as good as it is and as clean and technical as it is, it's not what I come to listen to. I still buy it. I'm going to try and get all the Darkthrone stuff, as a physical copy. I'll still definitely buy it. I don't own it yet, but I still definitely get it. I'm not just going to it's not a proper Darkthrone album. But it's still better, I think, than a lot of the black metal bits and bobs, as you can tell, because it's up in number 13th. But yeah, it's not something I visit all that often, but it is pretty enjoyable, I'll be honest with you. In 12th place then is Sardonic Wrath from 2004. And this isn't, the early 2000s stuff kind of gets lumped in with the late 90s stuff, but at the turn of the millennium, Darkthrone did fall into like a mini kind of era of their own with these records, as Sardonic Wrath was the last of 4 albums that were kind of in the same style. Now, it basically took the cold, hypnotic riffing of the early days and made it a bit more cleaner and made things a bit more, up to date and modern. But yeah, the thing here is that it works and it's nice and clean and it's nice and cool, but there's nothing really that stands out. There is excellent black metal across the board here. There's some really good riffs, like I said, and the songs, I cannot complain about the songs. The album cover is a bit interesting, but it's not something that I dislike. It's just nothing really pops out at me from Sardonic Wrath. Now, I like Sardonic Wrath, but there's other albums in this era which sound better, in my opinion, and that's why we're going to move very quickly on to number 11, Ravishing Grimness, the first in this series from 1999. Now, Ravishing Grimness has a bit more going for it. The album art, at least the original issue, is pretty bad, but this thing has some amazing songs on it. It is, for the most part, rather uneventful, but it is a superb effort all the while, and that sounds pretty daft, I know. It's easy, as I say, because these albums kind of all sound the same. They're riff-focused, and, it's basically just focuses on the riff, right, rather than anything else. And it's easily, perhaps, easy to tune these records out from Darkthrone's discography if you're not diving in deep, and by the time you've heard, you say you're listening chronologically, by the time you've heard Goatlord and Total Death, you may have just given up. So then when the albums like Ravishing Grimness and Hate Them and Plaguewielder and Sardonic Wrath follow, it's easy to blur them all into one kind of thing. But is it really fair to judge Darkthrone on, is it not as good as, the classic stuff, therefore it's not good? I don't think it is, because if this were any other band, if Ravishing Grimness was put out by any other band, perhaps even a Nocturnal Culto side project, anything that didn't carry the Darkthrone name, then I firmly believe this would have been praised rather than, people going, oh, okay, Darkthrone have released another album, great. The production on Ravishing Grimness is fairly clean by Darkthrone standards, but the music, as I said, for this era, doesn't really suffer from it. It just, you realise that the songs are maybe not as eventful as you would like. The riffs then, on the opposite side of the coin, have room to breathe and unfold, which is what you want for like the lengthier kind of 7-minuters that Darkthrone are doing on albums like this. Like I said, the are some great. It's very uneventful, as in like nondescript, and the whole thing kind of blurs into one album kind of listening experience. But the song "Claws of Time" is definitely my favourite from this album, so don't write this one off, definitely not. In number 10 then is Plaguewielder from 2001. This was the follow-up to Ravishing Grimness. I think it's not a million miles away from the previous album we just spoke about, but like I said about that album, it's a riff machine. Oh my life, we're down to 6 tracks on this album, most of them quite lengthy, 7, 8, 9 minutes, Everything I said about Ravishing Grimness stands for this one, to be honest. the production is clean, but this time it works better. It works well with the sound that the band are going for. And whilst it does almost feel like the band is on autopilot, there are still some excellent moments and riffs that are worth your time, like Weakling Avenger, the opening track, and I Void Hanger, track 5, which is just a banger, absolute banger, and a clanger. Yeah, so, and then in a similar vein, but better, is 2003's Hate Them, coming in at 9th place. Now, Hate Them takes all of this, the stuff from the three albums I just talked about, and it channels more of a like dirtier punk energy, like a Tom G. Warrior riff energy into that turn of the millennium sound that I'm talking about. One could argue that Hate Them lives up to its name. It hits a bit harder than the previous albums in this style. The songs just seem a little bit more angrier, with song titles like Fucked Up and Ready to Die, which was, funny enough, the first Darkthrone song I ever heard when I was a kid. It was on a compilation, a Kerrang CD, a Kerrang magazine compilation, would you believe it? And it's one of my favourite Darkthrone tracks, actually. Another one of my favourites is Det Svatna Na. I can't speak Norwegian, I probably butchered that. And closing track in honour of thy name is frothing out the mouth. It is rabid. So both Fenris and Nocturnal Culto are on top form for Hate Them. And it's fucking amazing, really. If you're going to start in this unsung and maybe overlooked middle period of Darkthrone's music, then, start with Hate Them, because this is solid fucking black metal record in any respect. In number 8th place then is, going back to the punk sound, is Darkthrones and Black Flags from 2008. Now, this is probably a bit silly. It's one of the sillier punk ones, as we covered earlier in the list. As you can probably see from the artwork on screen, it's very similar, and it's part of that like super punk sound with a heavy metal kind of element to it as well. I got a bit excited doing multiple re-listens recently, and for a moment I was coming to the conclusion that Darkthrones and Black Flags is my favourite of the punk era Darkthrone records, but no, it's not now, I think, on it, and it's still my second favourite, I think. And if I digest the songs a bit more, it definitely has the coolest name, Darkthrones and Black Flags. That's brilliant, and there are no King Diamond vocals on this, thank the Lord, and it's probably on par with Fuck Off and Die, but a bit more interesting, and it's not quite as good as Cult is Alive, which we'll get to. But either way, one of the 4 punk albums that followed Cult is Alive, Darkthrones and Black Flags, it's the one I return to the most. That's why it's so much further up the list. Production is very similar to Fuck Off and Die and Circle the Wagons from lower down the list, but, man, this thing has the songs to back it up. The Winds They Call the Dungeon Shaker, what a song. And Hiking Metal Punks, those are worth the price of admission alone. As far as side B goes as well, you've got a closing track called Witch Ghetto, which is an absolute belter, as is the title track. I don't know, really good, solid punk, heavy metal, Darkthrone album. In 7th place is Panzerfaust, one of the initial classic black metal records. Love that record sleeve, absolutely incredible. I love the music on this. It slows down a bit from the unholy trinity of original first 3 black metal records they did, but other than that, it's amazing. Peak, disgusting, lo-fi black metal, amazing. But the vocals are a bit hit and miss. There's all sorts of random fucking like groans and ooh, and all this crazy shit going on, and it's just like, what the hell is going on? I mean, it is easy to forgive bad vocals in something like black metal, but this is Nocturnal Culto we're talking about. He's an absolute legend, and he has one of the like most wicked kind of black metal kind of raspy snarls, like Wraith on acid snarls, like bleh. But like, on I just looking at my original review from this from 2020, and it says, on Panzerfaust the vocals sound like Tom G. Warrior is being fucked in the ass with a cactus, and and sorry, I'm laughing at my own jokes, but it's it's I mean, fucking hell, it's not the best in regards to the vocal performances. So that does let Panzerfaust down a little bit, but man, this is still a fucking classic, you know? It's still cold, grim, fucking black metal. Songs like Triumphant Gleam and the Hordes of Nebula. Track 6, Quintessence, is probably one of the best black metal riffs of all time. I think the lyrics on that one are written by Wagons of Bertsum as well. But it's I mean, Panzerfaust is fucking great, regardless of the vocals. In 6th place is Eternal Hails from 2022. Now, this really took me by surprise. I'll be honest with you. I did not expect to like this as much as I did, especially after, Arctic Thunder and Old Star, as much as good as they are. They didn't, blow my socks off. But here they do. It's, again, adding more that doom element in here. Darkthrone's Eternal Hails is the perfect combination of doom and black metal. It's really, really well done. Songs like Hate Cloak and The Lost Arcane City, amazing. Robust, natural, analog sounding production, and the usual predilection for slaying riffs. As long as you're happy with 7, 8, 9 minute songs, it's not a million miles in that regard away from Old Star, but the vibe is much different, and as I said, Lost Arcane City, the closing track is just fucking outstanding, like really good. Like they really took that doom metal trajectory of the last 5 or 6 years and turned it into something special with Eternal Hails. And let me tell you something else as well. In 5th place is Astral Fortress from this year, 2023. Is it 2023 or was it at the end of last year? No, sorry, I'm telling a lie. Eternal Hails was from 2021 and Astral Fortress was from 2022. I got my years mixed up. But yeah, they're both very recent albums. And Astral Fortress isn't quite as doomy and drawn out as, as Eternal Hails. It's not as cosmic, I suppose. But you still got amazing synthesizers on this one as well. I feel like I've really grown to really love the songs on this thing. A Caravan of Broken Ghosts, Impeccable Caverns of Satan, Stalagmite Necklace for a Nocturnal Culto song. I think it's a Nocturnal Culto song. It's one of the best Darkthrone songs. Really great. Really, 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 really good. The Sea Beneath the Seas of the Sea, as ridiculous as that song title sounds, is 10 minutes of just amazing black metal, with doom metal influence. Honestly, I fucking love Astral Fortress, and it seems to get a lot of flack for the album cover. I thought it was like a woman or fan or something wearing a Darkthrone patch whilst out ice skating, but apparently this is Fenris himself on the cover here, but I wasn't aware of that until recently. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool album cover. I don't have an issue with it. People seem to have an issue with it for some reason. But yeah, I mean, I love this thing. This is probably the best modern Darkthrone album, I think. Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. So let's go back in time a little bit then. For our 4th place pick, it is The Cult Is Alive from 2006. Easily, for me, the best. I almost caved and thought Dark Thrones and Black Flags may have taken this title, but no. The Cult Is Alive is the best crust punk influenced Darkthrone record. The cover is a bit top. Is that supposed to be Shakespeare or something? I don't fucking know. But I love the songs on this. I love this to death. It's black metal punk, Cult of Goliath, Too Old, Too Cold, Graveyard Slut, Whiskey Funeral, and Shut Up. Shut Up is just brilliant. It give Darkthrone a second wind, I think, with their career at this point. They just come off that run that ended in Sardonic Wrath, and they needed a bit of an injection, and this gave them that injection. I don't really think all the punk stuff was that great. As you know, it's quite far down in the ranking, but like The Cult Is Alive is an exception to that. It's, for me, the best album they did in this style by a country mile. And the song Shut Up has got to be one of my favourite Darkthrone songs, as comedic as it is. He's like, shut up, fucking twat. It's like, it's so ridiculous, but it's it works really well. Yeah, I fucking love this thing. It has a slightly colder, more black metal-y production than all the rest of the punk stuff, which has a warmer analog sound, but still incorporates black metal riffs. This is just cold all the way through, but has that punk kind of vibe to it. So yeah, excellent A-star record here. But there are better, of course, classic Darkthrone albums. I think everybody who watched this fucking video kind of knew what would be in the top 3, and it's just like, just going through the motions now, I guess. But in third place then is Under a Funeral Moon from 1993. Now, I think a lot of people would probably pick this as their favourite, but it's very, very like wasps in a jar, hollow, cold black metal, and yeah, that's what you come to black metal for, right? And yeah, stunning. But where was I going with this? Natasha in Eternal Sleep and holy black metal. The Under a Funeral Moon to walk the infernal fields and the in deep Skogan Varden. I can't fucking say. I mean, I could keep going. The Wasps are coming, and they've brought their riffs with them, right? So Under a Funeral Moon, peak Darkthrone, peak second wave black metal in general. Fairly robust in construction, despite the Wasp-like guitars and ethereal production. So I think the credit for the grounding of the songs can be given to the bass. Here it's very prominent. And later, they kind of go a bit unforgiving in the 90s in focusing on the guitar riffs and letting the mix kind of suffer. And you can get the beginning of that here, but at least the bass is audible, and it really underpins these classics, as it were. Cold, dark, ominous, beautiful black metal. Just look at that album cover. I love how the tree the way the logo is kind of like placed above the tree. It looks like it's all kind of forming into one. Almost like the even at some glances, it looks like the logo is shooting fucking lightning into the ground. Or, the tree is growing up into this absurd, dank logo that Darkthrone have. But yeah, either way, proper spooky fucking shit. Proper old school black metal. Absolutely fucking love it. So, without further ado, in second place then is A Blaze in the Northern Sky from 1992. The transition that took the band from Soulside journey and death metal, boom, straight into the black metal world. There are like holdovers or hangovers from the death metal sound in this record, maybe in some of the riffs, I guess, but for the most part, this is a solid, legendary black metal record. Songs like In the Shadow of the Horns and Catharian Life Code and Paragon Belial are just, staples of this genre now. And, if you've never heard black metal, then these are the songs that you kind of start with, really, isn't it? It's a stunning album, really, really good. And, it's the first in the original trilogy of albums that is legendary the world over, for their contribution to the second era of black metal from Norway, which took the world by storm. A Blaze in the Northern Sky is stunning. What a fucking amazing album. It's more denser in sound than its follow-up, as in regards to Funeral Moon that we just talked about. It's got a denser, more grounded production, but I find that Blaze maybe meanders a bit, wandering through the frozen crags of a hellish wilderness, and really gives you that perfect second wave black metal song, a sound that you want. It doesn't get too far up its own arse either. And there can only be one record left, right, at this point. And in first place then is Transylvanian Hunger from 1994. Easily the best of the 3 albums that they did in this initial cold black metal style. Absolutely, categorically, not only one of my favourite black metal albums of all time, but one of my favourite albums of all time from any band in any genre of music. I've been putting off talking on reviewing this thing for the 13 years that I've been writing and chatting shit about music, because what can be said about such a revered classic? But as we've polished off and opined on the remainder of the Darkthrone catalogue, it's time to get in and talk about Transylvanian Hunger. I kind of have to confront it. Transylvanian Hunger is the pinnacle of the Norwegian or second wave of black metal. For me, at least, there is nothing better than it. Some of the bits of stuff does come close, but none of the Darkthrone stuff does come close to Transylvanian Hunger, in my opinion, even though Funeral Moon and A Blaze in a Northern Sky are part of the same kind of trilogy. I love all of Darkthrone's music to some degree or another, but Transylvanian Hunger is such a bizarre outlier. I guess, like, it's a perfect distillation of the early 90s sound, yet also a stripped back and reduced version of it, with Fenriz basically doing everything on this album. That reduction to a core, constantly repetitive sound and production, whether accidental or intentional, it could have been out of, like, just laziness or even out of frustration just to get that sound. Either way, it set the bar for cold and raw black metal ever since, really. And I won't go into every song on this. I won't start listing songs because it's fucking pointless. Just, you need to listen to the whole thing in one go, as loud as you can, and then reflect on how that's, like, made you feel or whatever. I think everybody into metal should listen to this thing at least once, but I'm maybe a bit biased because, like, I heard this when I was a teenager and it just changed my life as far as my metal music trajectory goes. And I cannot think of a better album really in black metal at all. Like, what is the quintessential black metal album? I could maybe swap this out with one of the early Burzum albums, Burzum, but I will 99.9% of the time say Transylvanian Hunger. It is what black metal is for me, It is the album that I love and continue to come back to all of the time. And it is my favourite black metal album of all time. As, well, that's not very underground, is it? It's one of, like, the most well-known albums of all time in the scene. So that's not a very cult answer, is it? It's not like some fucking NSBM shit with 30 fucking tapes released from Finland or something, with, like, Jesus being torn in half on the cover and by some sort of Nazi werewolf or some shit like that. But fuck all that shit. This Transylvanian Hunger has been impossible to beat, I think. But I'm not an expert on black metal. I'm a grindcore death metal guy. So if, there is albums that are similar, if you're still with me in this video, you're still with me, and you know of albums that are similar to Transylvanian Hunger that I may be skipping over, then please point me in that direction and point me to some, abysmally raw black metal in this vein, which will scratch that itch that Transylvanian Hunger just satisfies, as it were. I have a hunger for a Transylvanian Hunger. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening and enjoying this sunny video of Darkthrone's discography. No doubt they will release another album very soon and make this list obsolete. But that's the way it goes with these videos. Thank you for watching, and stick around. Check out the rest of the channel if you've not, checked out any of my other videos. And I'll see you in the next one. All the best out there. Stay grim, stay cold.